even if we had had a presence there, had a residual force there, that would not have prevented and changed the facts that we've seen over the last 8 months.
That's not what Mr. Panetta says.
We had 150,000, 175,000 troops in Iraq during the surge, as you know. There was still a risk from al-Qaeda. They still were having successes on the ground.
All right, folks. There's, in my view, a very confused State Department spokeswoman. Joining us now is David Tafuri, former rule of law coordinator for Iraq at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and partner at Patton Boggs law firm. Hello, David.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
Good. So you're in Beirut.
I am.
Wow. And you had just left Iraq, correct?
That's right. I just flew here from Sulaymaniyah, Iraq.
All right. Are Leon Panetta's comments resonating over there at this point?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, over in Iraq, there's a great amount of concern about the situation. The Kurds have received great support from the U.S. from above and are very grateful for the airstrikes from above, but they're looking for more support in terms of military equipment and training in order to support the Kurdish Peshmerga forces who are in a fight to the death with ISIS.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what also Jen Psaki said, that even if we had left the force in Iraq, it wouldn't have changed things. I mean, how could she say that?
Well, I think, you know, clearly if we had left a significant force on the ground in Iraq, which both administrations had hoped to do but were unable to work out an agreement with the government in Baghdad, the situation clearly would be different. Certainly, ISIS would have been more reluctant to make the bold attacks that they did in June in Iraq and then in August towards the Kurdistan region. And certainly, we also would have been able to support the Iraqi security forces in Baghdad and help them with a much stronger response to ISIS when they invaded Iraq.
Now, the latest, the Syrian Kurds are saying that the airstrikes against ISIS are not working. ISIS fighters have pushed to the edge of Kobani. And they're avoiding the Western strikes. What is going on here? Why are we not being more effective from the air? Why are these things happening? Did ISIS just plant a flag in eastern Kobani?
Well, you know, as we've said all along, what ISIS does is goes after the most vulnerable towns and areas in Iraq and Syria, and we see them doing that again. Now they've turned a great amount of forces, heavily armored forces, including tanks and armored personnel carriers and heavy artillery, towards the town of Kobani. That is a Kurdish Syrian town on the border with Turkey. It's vulnerable because the main force that's protecting it is the Kurdish fighters, the YPG. They also have very light arms and limited ammunition, and they're running out because the town is surrounded. The problem is that there is no one who is able to fortify the YPG fighters to give them ammunition that they need to continue the fight against ISIS. And with them surrounded, there's no way to get in supplies other than to airdrop them. So there are, as I understand it, some limited U.S. airstrikes. Those are important and making an impact on ISIS, but not enough of an impact. There need to be more airstrikes. And if we want to save this town from turning into what we had in Sinjar in August, which is a huge humanitarian crisis with hundreds of thousands of Kurds having to flee if ISIS goes in and takes over the town, we need to do more.
Right, and of course that was the mountain. Now the Turks, we got about a minute left, David. The Turks have now said they're going to okay military action against ISIS, with some NATO member reluctantly being dragged kicking and screaming here.
Well, that's a welcome development, but so far Turkey hasn't done much on the ground in Iraq or Syria to support the fight against ISIS. You know, many people are questioning why. The decision by the government to get involved is a welcome one, but we need more than just a decision. We need action. Yeah, well, let's hope that it will be forthcoming. David, I thank you. Again, great talking to you. Thanks for joining us from where the action is going on. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Steve. All right, David Tafuri, ladies and gentlemen, former rule of law coordinator for Iraq at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and now he is in Beirut, having just left Iraq. All right, folks, when we come back, I have a lot to talk about with Newsmax Money News Deputy Financial Editor Rob Williams.
last week's unemployment numbers or job creation numbers, why they are what they are, why the unemployment rate dropped, and Hewlett Packard breaking up. And it's hard to do on the Steve Malzberg Show.